All right, so it's very nice to see you. And so today we're going to talk about the development of language, which happens to be one of my favorite Montessori topic, especially for the younger ones, because that's my specialty, the 0 to 3. But we can also answer any question you have about the primary. So I'm just gonna. I'm sure you read the email, so I'm just gonna do a little brief about the most fascinating thing that happened, which is the development and the process of language that actually starts from the womb, because the I'm just gonna wait for Rosa. Hi, Rosa. Nice to see you. um, so it starts from the womb because the voice of the mother and the father or anyone in a close circle is the first thing that the child can hear. And so that's when the development of language starts, because when the child is born, the only points of reference that he has to have some sort of confidence of what's happening in this incredible thing that's happening, which is birth, is literally the mother's heartbeat and the voices from the mother and the father. And so that's the reason why that as soon as your child is born, if like they put it next to you on your chest, because that's the first thing that the child can hear and recognize. So it's very linked to the language, to the voice and the hearing. All of this starts from there. So it's very, very important. And then he goes on when the child is about 2 months, and then the sight is a little better, and you would notice a child. Hi, Christian. And Christian used to be in my classroom as a toddler.
Just a quick hello and good night to Mr. Nate.
Hi. Hi, Mr. Nate.
Hi, Christian. Have a good night. And so when he's 2 months old and he starts to really focus on the mouth, you would notice children staring at the mouth of adults when they're really little, and that's when it's happening in the brain. They realize that this thing here is producing noises, and it's like communication is starting. And so little by little, the child is making more noises, blah, 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 blah. And then like mama or papa happen. And then the adults are like, oh, you said my name, you called me. And then this interaction is what makes everything magical, because suddenly the communication is really working. And the child realizes that when he's making those sounds, he's getting a reaction from the people around. So then suddenly they just start getting those noises coming. They wake up in the crib, and before they cry and call you, you can hear them going ba 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 ba. And what they doing at that moment is so important. What they doing is that everything they've been absorbing throughout the day, all those sounds that they've been hearing from you and any adults around, they are trying to mimic this. And what they're doing by this mimicking is getting all the oral apparatus, the muscles, the jaw, everything ready to be able to reproduce those sounds exactly like you do. And that's how you get accents. That's how you get different languages. If you're a bilingual house, that's how they do it. And that's why it's all about absorbing those noises. And how we talk to children from that moment when they're born is so important. And how you do it. And it's such a internal process that is just like, it's just fascinating. The development of language is fascinating because the brain works so differently. And we always talk about the absorbent mind in Montessori, but that's exactly what it is it doesn't work like our brain does. It's like you picture little drawers of a child, and they would just put a language in there, and then, oh, that's my French drawer, I'm gonna put it there, and that's my English drawer, and I put it there. There is no traduction in there. They don't translating. That's the way of working with our scientific brain. We need to make sense of things, so we need to translate. They don't they, they don't. It's just natural. It's just in them. It's in there. And so even as a child, when you're exposed to another language on a very consistent basis, and then you don't hear it for years and years and years and years, and you're an adult and you hear that language again, and it would be weird, but it would be like familiar to you. It would just feel like home, and you would probably pick up on that language very quickly. There is another thing that I want to add that is very fascinating to me, is the people that learn a new language the fastest are usually people who speak Arabic, because Arabic language has the most decibels in their language. So they go really high and they go really low. So when you try to learn another language, it's easier for you to reach those notes, and so you've been practicing and your oral apparatus is more developed, so you will pick up on new languages faster and you will learn faster and it will be easier. That's why they're pretty good at learning languages. And French are really bad, and Chinese are really bad too, because it's a way more monotone, like flat language. So yeah, so that was my little story about development of language that I wanted to share, this fascinating process, the little history of language. And if you have questions now, I'll be very happy to answer. I just wanted to add just one more thing, which was about yeah, the basically the pyramid of learning a language. Hi. Oh, there's a cat too. Hi. There is also yeah, the pyramid of language. So when a child is learning a language and is learning a word, what I'm trying to talk here is about the baby talk. It's like we avoid the baby talk, especially in Montessori environments. We're not repeating what the funny sounds that the child is making. We never correct a child either. We just keep on talking the way we would normally talk, so the child can absorb those right things. Because if you start saying, I would use a British word, which is ta. I've heard, I lived in England for a long time, and I've noticed that parents teach their children to say ta instead of thank you. And they just say, it's easier, and I want my child to be polite, so I'm going to teach my child to say ta, and when he's old enough, I'm going to tell him we say thank you. And it's very common, and it's very, very normal. But then it's very interesting, because then the child is literally, he's gonna have to relearn that we say thank you. We don't say ta, we say thank you. So that moment where the child is gonna have to relearn something he could have learned in the first place, that moment when he's learning thank you, he could be learning another word, something more like the breed of a dog, or something else. Or maybe he could be learning a math problem, who knows, you know what I mean? So if you start with the right thing from the start, you're freeing up the mind to learn more things at later. You don't have to go back to what you should have learned at that time. And we always, because this process is so in the mind and so invisible to start with, especially in the first few years, we kind of underestimate that potential. And I'm gonna add one more thing that I've said in previous evenings, and then you heard me saying maybe a million times, but the brain of the child, the amount of information, the amount of things that a child learn in the first 3 years of life would take us, with our brain, our scientific brain of traduction and everything without the drawers, it would take us 63 years. So this invisible thing that we don't know, that they are just blah, 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 and crying, is actually where everything's happening. And especially with languages and everything. And I want to really insist on this, because it's very important. When we start to understand the potential of the child, then we can really unleash all the incredible thing that this human being is capable of doing, especially with languages. Actually, they've been doing scientific researches on this, and apparently a child is able to learn 12 languages at the same time without it being confused, if it's done in a very specific way. But the brain is capable of learning 12 languages in the first 3 years or 6 years of life, and then it becomes harder. That's fascinating to me. That was my shared experience with you, so I'll be very happy to take any questions you have, especially I know you have toddlers, so we have 2 infants and 2 primary children here. So any questions? Rosa and Ben, you actually have both. You have Christian, who is an older child in primary, and it's actually, you have a very interesting setting, because you are English at home, and your both children are going to be in the Spanish immersion program. So you went for the bilingualism, which is amazing. And Kristen used to be in my classroom, which was toddler English, and we made a bridge straight to Spanish, and it wasn't too late. And it would be interesting to know, it's like, how is Christian doing with the Spanish? Did you see that he's like picking up on it, and how is he? Is it trajecting? It would be interesting.
Yeah, he is. I think it probably changed like a little bit with COVID. Obviously, he was with home with us a lot, so there wasn't a lot of Spanish going on. So we're looking forward to him sort of picking it back up. But yeah, he wouldn't like practically speak a lot of Spanish, but we'd be at home, and like an example would be he'd get frustrated with something. Like he was annoyed with something I was doing, for example, and instead of saying "Daddy, stop," he goes "No bueno," and lately like various like things like that would sort of come out, and we'd like talk with that. Rosa speaks a bit of Spanish, but like we do a few things. He can. Our housekeeper speaks Spanish, and if she speaks to him, he'll understand what she's saying and answer back. He always answers in English, but he can definitely understand it. Which is great. I think we're really happy with Christian's talking. One of the concerns I think I had going into the bilingual was like, is it going to hold him back in his learning of English? And like that obviously was, I think probably Mr. Knight, you explained to me as well, as did Mr. Lamakura at the time, that's like, it's maybe a common fear, but a completely unfounded one. And if anything, I'm like super happy with his like English sort of ability anyway. Yeah, so we're pretty happy sort of with it. And then Sage is just starting to talk now. So we're kind of trying to work on her vocabulary and things. She's sort of like, it was interesting to hear you obviously talk about like the first words you learn and things. She's kind of a little bit confused in some of like the like the da and like ma words, right? So we start with, maybe wrongly, with like mama and sort of dada, right? But she confuses like mama with more, like saying more for more food, and more and mama like the same thing, like, so she's kind of confused about that. So we're trying to work through that a little bit. And da, like in her mind, we think is that. So whenever she wants to say that, she'll say da. So it's impossible for me to get her to call me dada. She's like, I've got no name in the house. Like I've got nothing. I've got like no status with Sage. She knows Christian's name, and so that's where we are trying to sort of work through some of those issues.
It's very interesting how as adults we just are so impatient not impatient, but like we so look forward to hear them and to really have that bridge of communication. And we know communication is everything. We know that the development of language is so important to help them go through the emotional thing. You know, the tantrums are very much linked to development of language. Biting, hitting, all the behavioral problem that you have around, 2 and 3 are almost like 99% linked to language. So it's like we can't wait for that. And you see like she's making sounds and you think she's confused, and it's like and you know it will happen, and then they don't stop talking, and it's like why, and it's too much, right? But those moments, like, it's not necessarily confusion. She's just as long as we are just saying the right thing at the right time. It's like another thing that we do very often is to call a child and to talk to them as a third person. Like I would say Christian, for example, and I would say that Christian is eating his food, but instead of saying you eating your food, or like, or mommy is eating a food, no, I am eating my food. And that's also is something that we think they understand better because we think and assume they're confused, but they know they just, and that's another thing about, that's gonna have to relearn that I don't have to talk about me saying my own name, but I can say I. And that's also important for learning your place and understanding your identity as an individual in an environment. And that's something we do, but that's because we are so amazed as well by how they do. And we see these new words coming every day, and we want more and we want more. And so we want to simplify things for them, thinking that it's going to be clearer. And then it's very fascinating. And then they really, and it's very interesting. So I would just, for Sage, it's just like the age, and like, I'm pretty sure she will like say the right thing very soon. Maybe she loves the sound of who knows. You know, they're fascinating when they're reading a book and they keep on wanting to stay on the same page again, or the same book. You finish the book and like, you want to pick another book? And they just bring you the same book. And it's like, we just read that book about 5 times. And then why that page? That could be just that one word, that one sound. You know, it's fascinating. Why with the younger children, we just have picture books with no words on it? Because even just the writing of the letters is something of interest to them. So when you just have the picture and you say the word, it's easier. So that's how you would like make the confusion less. You see how fascinating. I told you that their potential is incredible. The connection between the neurons, that we don't have that in our entire life. And so it's not confusion, it's just making those connection in those neurons, and it's just giving her the chance to have that experience with words and environment, and having the sound with a word and a picture and an image and a movement and all of this processing in this fascinating brain of them. I also would like to ask, like, how is Jojo doing? Because Jojo is in a really bilingual, even like multilingual house, right? With Portuguese and Brazilian and English.
Yeah, Denise speaks to her mainly in Portuguese. She was even more consistent when she was smaller, and now it's a little more mixed. And Jojo tends towards English, but when she's talking to her grandparents, who are in Brazil on Zoom or on the phone, she'll speak in Portuguese. And like when we go there, it'll take her a little bit of time, but then she'll sort of get more comfortable speaking in Portuguese. So she'll often answer Denise in English still now, more often than not. But I'm wondering, I'm looking forward to seeing because we have also Natalia, who is 10 months.
That's true. I've been gone too long. Sorry.
Right. No. And she'll be starting at Pache in April.
Oh, congratulations. That makes me all emotional.
So yeah, and Denise is speaking to her in Portuguese, and so pretty consistently. And so I'm wondering how Denise, I mean, Jojo sometimes talks to Natalia in Portuguese and sometimes in English. And Natalia is still like, sometimes it seems like she's trying to say like dada or mama, but sometimes she'll look at me and say dada, and sometimes she'll just look into space and say dada, dada over and over again. So it's hard to know which it is at this point, but she's getting close to like it's becoming clear that she's like trying to communicate sometimes, like look at me and make a sound, in the last few weeks anyway.
Yeah, and you see, we're coming back to this dada. Why is everything dada? Because when she said dada, she got a reaction. So let's see. Oh, dada reaction? No. That's just what it is. They're just experimenting with things like, oh, and that's it's a very important point, because when they're on 4 months, that's usually when they really start making those noises that start to get reactions. And what happens is, if you have a child who's trying to make noises and is not really, so then he's not getting, and you reacting, but the child stops. And that's how they can detect very early on that babies are deaf, because they see that they stop making those noises. They stop because they can't hear your reaction. They maybe see it, but they can't hear it. And so they don't get that feedback from what they're making. And so they kind of give up and they become very like sadder children. And so you can detect very early on through that process, especially this reaction that you give. So it's dada, and then she got something from you, and I'm gonna look at a bird and say dada and see. And that's very interesting. And that's how, and then from that moment on, that's when they're really gonna have to, like, they're really gonna make all those noises and all those muscles are gonna go crazy. To coming back to the bilingualism, so it's actually one of my specialty. I worked for a long time in a bilingual school back in London as well, and it was French English, and my role was the French role, and I was not allowed to speak any word of English, even when the postman came to give me the post, and I was not allowed to speak any English in front of the children. Why is that? It's very important. I want to make clear that this was a bilingual school, but it's very, very specific. It was half a day. I know that life is impossible for this to be achieved. Like Denise and you are gonna have to speak English. Like you live in New York, English is gonna have to be the main language. But a way, remember I say a child can learn 12 languages. And there is like one way that is easier, that works more, is children associate one language with one person. Why does Jojo speak Portuguese to your grandparents? Maybe does your grandparents speak English a lot? Has she ever interacted with them in English? Probably less, because she sees them less, right? And so she can associate Portuguese with those. She knows she has to make the effort. If she knows that you speak and understand English when it's the main language, that's the one that she's been practicing the most. Children are smart. Why would they make the effort of speaking a language that they don't, it's easier to do English, so why do I have to do the other one? I will make the effort when I really need to, because I need to communicate. So my grandparents don't really speak English, they don't understand it, and I want to communicate with them, so I'm going to force my brain into speaking Portuguese. So it is complicated to achieve this in a bilingual house, because like for example, French is my mother tongue, my partner is English. Unless he understands French fluently and I speak French and he answers to me in English and we communicate that way, then the child will be able to pick up like it's French with me and it's English with him. But that's almost impossible. Like that would be amazing, but it won't be. So we're always gonna have that problem. But it's not really, what's important is this exposure to the child to those sounds, because those sounds are also fascinating. They're different, so they're still going to produce those, and it's going to stay in there. Like Jojo with Portuguese and the grandparents, she is able to, after a little while, get that machine back going. And that's what I was telling you, once it's in there, it always stays. So even if she doesn't speak Portuguese for a very long time, when she, like even in 20 years, she'll be able to pick it up and it'll be easier and faster. You see what I'm saying with bilingualism and like development of language? It really stays in there. And that's why, like at Pache, the Spanish immersion program is great, because they really speak English. Sorry, they do in total English, but they also do in the Spanish immersion. They give all the lessons in Spanish, and it's fascinating, because then that becomes the bubble. It's the bubble, but when you go to the park with the kids, they don't speak Spanish to each other, do they? They would never do, because they know that they speak English. Why would you make the effort? Why would you make the effort to speak another language when you've been doing this at school, and it's great and it's my bubble when I'm in my classroom, but right now I'm at the park having fun and I know you speak English and you understand English, so why? You see what I'm saying? So it's all like a natural process.
I have a question. With just going back to the basics at the infant stage, you keep hearing, from the pediatricians that the child should have X number of words by a certain age. I was curious what the Montessori approach, I know with Christian, we didn't really start until toddlers. So I was curious on how, that whole Montessori approach is with that philosophy from like the medical professionals.
No, but you saw my face, my reaction. Pretty expressive. No, I don't believe in this. We don't put children in boxes. We don't have a grid and tick boxes. Every child is different. Every human being is different. We all have a way of learning. You have children who don't speak and say a word for 3 years, and then suddenly they start opening their mouth and they're talking like a book, and like, what just happened? Every child is different. Every child has a way of processing. It's still there. That's what I was saying. Always believe in the potential. If there is a physical problem, as I said about a 4-month-old, and then there is no reaction, then you do an auditive test. Like those are the physical thing. If a child is not saying a word, but there is no hearing problem, there is no any physical problem, then there is most likely no problem. And then you won't be able to actually detect if there is something else that is not physical. you won't be able to detect it until way after 3, because sometimes it just takes longer, and you really have to really trust the process and believe in in the in that process, in that development. I can actually share a little story that happened in my classroom. um I had a little girl who did not speak. She came into the classroom, she was 17, 18 months, and she didn't speak for a very long time, no word, not nothing. And she was fine with everything. We had the testing, she was fine, she would be socializing in other ways. And then we had a fish, and we didn't know how to call it. And I asked the children, how do you want to call the fish? And like, not her, I asked the group. And then she for the first time said Coco. And she said the word, and it's the first time that we, all of the children and the teachers, we heard. And we was like, okay, that's how we're gonna call the fish. We're gonna call the fish Coco. And that happened, and that was it. And she started talking that day, and it literally happened from one day to the other. That was a first word in the classroom, and then she was just talking, and this child is absolutely fine, and she has no delay whatsoever. In, like, she's fine. And sometimes we just need to believe. Sometimes they're just waiting for that moment. Nobody has all the confidence, and like, no, everybody's outspoken, and like, once, like, everybody has their personality. You also have secret walkers. Have you heard of that? Children that actually stand up and start walking, but they do it when nobody watch them. And they just waiting to be more confident as walkers to finally do their first steps in front of the parents. And it's been caught on camera. That's like some children, they just do this from like when they're very little. They need that. I'm going to show that I can speak when I'm ready. They usually have, like, they really decide they are the masters of their own. That's why they're fascinating. They're not easy. They're fascinating. And also, whatever is hard right now never lasts. They are not kids forever, and especially at this age. So that's why it's so important, and that's why I'm so happy that you guys are here and we're doing those nights, because those years are so short and so important and fascinating. Secret walker, secret speakers.
I had a question about the ways to reinforce the secondary language.
Mhm.
So my first language is Finnish, which is like one of the rarest languages there is. And like, there's no really, especially in the era of quarantine, there's no other like real person other than like grandparents on Skype that she hears this from. So always, but especially now, it's really top of mind. Like, what are the ways to assist her learning Finnish, given that Fritz doesn't speak Finnish, and so English is the language that we speak at home also. So we're doing things like, we have ambient audio, like the Finnish news on, or like I do songs, and I of course speak in Finnish to her, but I am the only source of the language for her. So I was curious, what are the sort of best ways to get that to sink in, given that it's only me and her?
Talking to her, really talking to her, reading books. There's like, when you don't have many options, you become the best option. Like, this is literally, and it's also a time in our lives that it's so special, when it's hard to, because I'm sure you could find a community and then meet people that speak your language, especially in New York. I know they are, but it's just much harder right now, and it's unfortunately another side effect of what we're going through right now. And but yeah, so right now, just what you do is the best you can do. Language lessons, I would say books, really reading stories to her, reading books, um and having pictures. Just take pictures of things, and you put it in a photo album, and you just point out the word, and you say apple, and like orange, or whatever word you want to do, but like things like this, keeping it simple and saying what word at a time, and just talking to her. The best way is really the voice, the direct voice, not necessarily the screens and the radio and the TV. The best is like looking how you do, how the mouth moves, and how like they also learning about volume that way, you know. So it's very important.
And it's really funny to watch her interact with my mom, for example. Somehow she gets it. It's much different to watch her reaction to like watching like Finnish TV versus watching her grandma on the screen. Even though like it's kind of the same. Like sometimes I wonder like if she like understands, but it's very clear that like she gets it, and she's like gotten to know her grandma essentially exclusively over video chats.
Oh, this word makes me want to cry. But it's there is another thing about screens and younger children, especially Skype and TV, especially TV. Actually, Skype is slightly different because, well, no, it's the same. There is a thing about screens that it's very hard for them to understand and process that I hear you and you are communicating with me and you're talking to me, but I cannot touch you. And that's why very often children go very close to the screen, because they are trying to feel. They're trying to feel. They're trying to understand. They're trying to understand and figure out. No, animals do the same actually. They sometimes you call them on Skype and then the dog will end up going behind the laptop looking for you because you come from that. And children is kind of doing this too because they're processing the environment, they're processing the real world. And so they understand there is something happening with the voice and like, but they can't feel like the person is actually not here. And that's a concept that they do a lot in infant classrooms. It's object permanence. And so you have the soft toy and you put it in a box and I don't see it. And then they reopen the box and they see the object again, and that it's called object permanence. And it's really something that you work on with children. And it's very hard as a concept. And that's why you work a lot on this. And it is the same thing with Skype and the TV and stuff. So, but you keep on doing it because it's nice that she can have that relationship and she's still hearing the language from another person as well. It's just I just wanted to say that about the screen, that sometimes their reaction is weird with this and their interaction is weird with this. And it's also because they are trying to process another thing that is not only the language, is also that
Yep.
is happening.
It is really funny because she would do things like she will offer food to your grandma that's on the screen, or she will do the whole like let's point at like dad's nose and let's point at grandma's nose, and she does it like very fluently somehow, which is, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if it messes with her brain that she's developing these like pretty.
It is hard because it's basically another concept that she's also trying to figure out.
Yeah.
You know, children would have a tantrum because they dropped their toy and also it's right there, but they don't see it. They would just have a tantrum. It's like, you had it in your hand, you just drop it. But to us, it's such a normal concept, but to them, it's everything.
Yeah.
Like, well, your toy is in your room, but they can't see it, so they can't picture it. They can't picture things. We talk a lot about imagination, and we say like, oh, but this is so great for imagination when they're young. Let's develop imagination. But what's imagination? And what's imagination and for what age and when? And that's very interesting because that's coming back to what we're talking about, which is imagination is like, I have my pen right here. And now, how's my pen? New picture my pen. That's imagination. Now you know my pen is blue and you know how it looks like because you saw it. But a child is figuring that out. It's like, where is the pen if I don't see it? And how do I picture it in my brain without seeing in front of my eyes? When you ask what's imagination for a 5 or 6 years old, that's when like the imagination that we think of as adults is, and that's called fantasy world, of like things that are not real, and but we can pretend that they are real because now I have enough knowledge of what the real world is to start to have a pretend imaginary world. So imagination at a younger age is actually more about processing what the real world is right now. Why giving them a fake world when they just trying to understand what the real world is right now, right? So imagination is about this. It's really, we tend to mix creativity with imagination and all of this. And imagination is really is processing the real world and picturing things. Like maybe if you never saw a horse and asking a child to draw a horse, like it's, all of this is like based on reality, why you can just like picture in your brain something that your child has seen or not seen.
Mr. Knight, a question related to that. What do you think of like, I guess the toys that might be like a child has a toy kitchen or something like that, right? Obviously,
A toy? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
A kitchen, those toy kitchens you can get where the kids
can kitchen.
They're cooking, kind of doing those things. Obviously, that's not real to kind of mimicking. I just wondered like where that sort of fits on the spectrum you were describing of kind of real versus.
It depends on the age, and you have ways to use those kitchen that can be very useful and for real. So the you can use those toys when they're slightly older and they can really start making these pretend games, right? So but really before 4 or 5, they're not necessary. Like really imagination really starts around like 4 or 5, and then 4 is really on the younger side of it. Before that, if you have a little kitchen, like a wooden kitchen, because also people tend to think that if it's wood, it's Montessori. So you can have a little tiny wooden kitchen and call it a Montessori toy. Actually, it might not be. If you have a little wooden small kitchen, you can really use it as there is a little cupboard, and you can literally put a couple of small plates and a couple of cups that your child can retrieve from that to take to the table and set up their own table. So you're not using it as pretend cooking, you're using it as an object in your environment that gives her some independence. So we tend to not, you take the home environment or any environment, and then when you make it a smaller size, thinking that it's going to be a toy for your child, but you have to think about the purpose of that toy. So we try to avoid going onto the pretend world, and we just try to come back on the real world. We want to try to experience the real world so he can have such a blast when he can enjoy the pretend world, right? So, but before having that blast, you need to understand what the real world is. So that's my point on the same on the kitchen thing. Why having toys if you are doing the kitchen and then you having oranges and apples and a banana, toys ones, plastics or wood, right? And but they look like this. So when you take a toy that is a plastic orange and it looks like nothing, just an orange, then you're not giving your child the opportunity to imagine and to be creative. But if you give your child a bowl, a wooden bowl with no colors or whatever, very neutral, and then that thing can become anything. That can be an apricot, that can be an apple, that can be an orange. And that is when you use your child's imagination and creativity. You see what I mean? We're not feeding the child imagination. We are leading the child towards making his own imagination, his own world. So you have to be careful with those stories and how you use them. Always try to get back to the reality and let them explore their own creativity.
Just to go back to Sarah's point on, reinforcing that language, that other language that's spoken by one parent. What's the recommendation? You mentioned the putting together like some photos in some kind of a file album, whatever. Is the recommendation to purely use that language, or is it okay to translate it to, like, say, English that the child is already familiar with, and say, well, this apple is called X in Finnish? What's the best? Is there a recommended approach?
All right, so sage age, no. Christian age, yes.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yep. Yeah, we're in the same boat for Swahili. I should be making more of an effort, but it's just so hard, as Sarah said.
So a little trick that you can do in terms of books, and that could be like, I'm just thinking it's on top of my head, but you could take 2 photo albums, one red, one blue, whatever. And the red one is going to be in Swahili and always in Swahili. The blue one is always going to be in English. Could be the same pictures, but one is in Swahili, one is in English. And so then she's gonna associate the color with the language for those books. So that could be an interesting thing. And you can actually change those pictures. So you can like change those picture books and it would always be, that's a Swahili book.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I guess a similar, so I don't speak Finnish, but I've been gradually trying to learn Finnish. So
you should go to the reading session with mommy.
Right. So I mean, there's a lot of different, I have some Finnish vocabulary. I have some of this, and there's some songs that she loves in Finnish. Like there's like literally an alphabet song in Finnish, and if she's upset, like sing that alphabet song. It's in Finnish. That's the song you sing. She gets happy. Is that running a risk of like causing a lot of confusion? I mean, she's hearing a lot more English on a daily basis, but we're both switching a bit into the other language.
I would try to avoid the switching for reasons that I said previously. It's better one language, one person as much as possible. And because you do not speak Finnish, I would try to stay away and just stick with the English.
Yeah.
Especially because if you didn't learn the language when you were younger, you probably don't make the noises as correctly as a native speaker. And it's so specific. So I'm not asking you not to speak, but I'm just saying like right now it's like I don't know, if like someone was asking me right now to read that book in German, and I've never learned German, and I would see the words and I try to say this, but that would make like I don't know how to do this. And then so if I feel like the child is going to have a meltdown because I cannot produce what he's asking me, I would just be like, I'm really sorry, I can't read it in English, I can't read it in French. Maybe we can ask like whoever later when she's back, she can read it in English. It's being honest with our children about the language is also important. Like being honest with them. Like I don't know the alphabet in Finnish. I'm sorry. But I can do it in English, or we can find another song.
On a little bit of a different direction. So we're planning to do the toddler Spanish class with her. So she'll have Spanish at Pache and then Finnish and English at home. Is there anything, and obviously like English out in the world, is there anything we should be thinking about, anything kind of about having that sort of, I guess, trilingual? Is there something special about a third language, or is it kind of all the same as long as it's sort of consistent?
It's just as once again, if you are consistent with how you introduce your child to the language, it's easier. So I would just keep that thing natural. So it's going to be Spanish at school, English in social life, and mainly at home, and then finish with mommy, right? And as long as you just stick with this and this is what it is, then she might never speak Spanish, but then she would have hear it. She would have heard it. It would be part of her environment. That would be part of what she's doing at home. She might never say a word. She'll be exposed to this. And just that is a gift that you're giving to your child. You're exposing your child to another language, and it's just not done by someone who's like, oh, hola, ¿qué tal? It's like, it's not my Spanish. It's a real Spanish person. So that means that it's a real communication. And that's gonna help your child build, like, open a new drawer that was empty and put information in that drawer. And then even if that drawer closes and it doesn't open for years, it's still going to be in there if it's done by a real native speaker. And Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, we were initially concerned, like, oh, could there be more potential for language delay or something like that? And our pediatrician said, no, go for it. Like, go do the third language, but you have the opportunity for that. And so, but still, there's something that still feels a little bit intimidating about the process.
Sorry, you broke up just at the end. There is something
something a little intimidating about it.
Intimidating. Yes, it is, because it's intimidating to us.
Yeah.
Because our brain is so small. But it's no, you're doing it. It's the best thing. The more languages, it's actually what I would like to do for my children. Speak French. The dad speaks English, and then like taking a school in Spanish, Chinese, whatever other languages. It's like, give me the languages, all the languages. Taking a nanny that speaks a fourth language, why not? Just exposing your child to a language, but being consistent in how you introduce it to your child. That's what matters. Remember, one person, one language is the cleanest, best way to do it, and having no expectations from your child. And whatever confusion, it always gonna be back to normal. And then they might be, what you can see sometimes when it's like heavy in like different languages is like a child who speak like, do a sentence that really happened very often in French and English households, because especially French and English don't say the words in the same order. And so you have children that would just like construct the sentence in like weird orders, and then having an English word and a French word. And it's just because whatever word they're more comfortable, like whatever word they're more comfortable with. And I leave this as an adult when I have French friends that speak English fluently like me, and then we having conversations that we're so comfortable having, but it's really mixed. It's mixed in English, mixed together. And it's just because a different emotions, a different word. And then having different languages, you have more vocabulary, right? And so, but it's fine in the brain, because once again, remember those drawers. So it would just make sense eventually, like if it's done properly, eventually everything she would be able to speak normally. There will be some words that might be in another language. No correcting is one thing. Like, we don't say like this, we say like this. We try not to point, but we just like, if your child says something not the right way, you just say it after the right way without saying, no, that's not how. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if your child say apple, you don't say, oh, we don't say apple, we say apple. You say, if your child say apple, you just go, oh, that's the apple, yes. You see, so you're not making a big deal out of this. You're not pointing out this is wrong, and so you can do this with the language too.
Can I ask a very
Pardon?
Can I ask a very specific question?
Yes, of course.
You were talking about how important the sort of mouth movement and saying the words just right and all of that is. What do you think about sort of the baby not really seeing anybody other than the two of us without our masks on for pretty much the entirety of their life at this point?
I had the exact same question. I'm really glad you asked that, because we're just trying to get August to learn one language right now. And he has not yet said mama. He says it same in your situation. He said mama anytime he's hungry, wants food, mama, mama, mama. But then anything fun is da, 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 da. And now he just says da, da. So I don't get it, but I am curious about the math thing.
He gets the mom and dad, he gets reaction. So that means it's going. That means it's happening. It's working. So that's good. It's a good sign. when they say the same sounds, whatever, maybe it's baba, whatever sounds they saying, and if they keep on saying for different situations, that means it's working in there. That means the process of language has started, like properly started. So be reassured. But yeah, no, to answer your question, it's yes, another very, very side effect of this world we live in right now. And it is hard, but being with adults and other children that speak, that the great thing about being in Montessori, the amazing luck that we have in being in Montessori environments is mixed age group. So your child might be on the younger side, but it will be older children, especially if they move to toddler soon, who do talk without a mask. yet, you know. And so then they would see this. There is you bubble. I'm sure there is like some other people around that you can see that don't have a mask on. Social distancing. Hi, Denise. Social distancing and still seeing the mouth. It's a horrible thing that we're going through. Hopefully that's gonna end soon. But just once again, if you don't have many options, but you have one, just use that one as much as you can. So keep on talking to your child with no mask on. Give that opportunity. Just keep on doing it more than, be aware and do it more than you would have done it. Because now you have to be aware. Did I, yeah? It's sad. You know, without this COVID, I wouldn't be here and I would be with you guys in real life. And yeah, but it will get better.
I was just going to say that with what we've noticed with Christian is he speaks so loudly now. It's always like an outside voice inside because of the mask. It's just like notched down, like we can hear you. Like,
it's very interesting because even adults have that. Yeah. Even adults have that. It's very interesting, especially people that have been wearing them. Like, I don't wear my mask very often because I'm locked down here. But like, for example, my partner who has the mask constantly because he's an essential worker. And when he takes it off, he's screaming. And I'm like, I can hear you. So it does happen even to adults. So it's normal. But you can just simply remind them, like, I can hear you. Let's remember to use our inside voice. We have the mask off now.
He was loud before and he's like insane now. Yeah, it's so bad. Yeah.
I mean, to be fair to him, we probably sound the same.
We don't realize. That's the crazy thing. We don't realize that we do sound louder when we take the mask off. Who would have thought we would have that kind of conversation?
I know. Is there any news, Miss Donate, when you can come back?
Miss Zollinger is working so hard on making me come back. She's very optimistic. I just wanna think that we are in a better political situation for me to come back. And there's been some very optimistic signs, so it's going the right direction. Then also all the vaccines and all of this is really happening now. It's real. So it's looking brighter. I just don't want to put any dates on it, but it's looking brighter. I miss you, all of you. I'll be back. It will be better. 2021 would be 2022 for sure would be something, but for sure. I know I see the nodding head, but like we have to see something in the future that can be better. We would have a life without mask in a classroom. That would happen. We have to believe, and then in the meantime, we really have to just be much more aware of what's going on in the children's life and how, as I say, when you don't have many options and you become only the one option, just being aware really changes everything. And we're all here to support you, Apache. Any question you always have, you can always email anyone and we'll be there. Especially language. I find the language one of the most fascinating development. Yeah, very exciting, very fascinating. Because this is it's very linked. Development of language, as we said, is very linked to tantrums and social and emotional development. And when your child is about to be in toddler environments, biting, pulling, hitting, all of this, it is language development. So working with the children in their language development is also the emotional and social development. And there's going to be the development of writing and reading, and it's so important.
On one last question, is Danae, on the language, right? The Montessori approach, like one of the things I sort of wonder about sometimes is, like obviously because it's child-led, like there's no and enforcing is the wrong word, or like necessarily sort of super strong encouragement of the child to speak in that language, like in the class, even in the Spanish immersion, right? So that all the teachers will speak in Spanish, 100%, but the children often reply in English and talk to each other in English, like in the class. And some schools that are non-Montessori the teachers will say, I can't understand you if you don't speak like that language, and like kind of force the response into the language. Whereas obviously Montessori, it's child-led, so that sort of doesn't happen. So I just sort of wondered about that, and I wondered like if Christian would be better sort of speaking if he was pushed to speak to some extent in the class in that language.
I'm gonna be a little harsh on that, but I would say that would be. I find this so disrespectful of the child. Like, how can you say in one language, if you don't speak that language to me, I can't understand when you're saying this in that language? Like, do you think I'm stupid? I might be 4, but I'm not stupid. It's so disrespectful of the child. The child is answering in another language because he knows that you understand that. He will make the effort if he knew. There was when I did my training, I had this really interesting story of a family. The mom was staying at home, and I don't remember the languages. Let's say it was Spanish, but I don't remember. So the mom was stay at home, and she would only speak Spanish to her child, and the dad also spoke Spanish at home. Okay, so the child at home only had Spanish. It was just Spanish, and the dad, the mom would always be home, and every time there was something with the school, it would always be the dad dealing with this, and it was in English. And so the teacher would speak to the dad, and the child would hear the dad speaking in English and all of this. And then one day, and then so the child was only speaking Spanish at home. And then one day there was a problem, and the dad couldn't come to the school, so the mom had to come. And the mom come to school, and the child started to speak Spanish to his mom, and then started to say in English things, and he started to translate. Naturally, the child took the initiative to translate from English to Spanish and Spanish to English, but then the mom started to speak in English, and the child looked at his mom like nearly a traitor, and he was like, you spoke English this entire time? And he just had no idea. But you see how he made the effort to translate, and that's how it works. So forcing the child to speak another language just because you are in an immersion program is not going to help the child, and it's so disrespectful of the child because he's not stupid. He knows you speak English. And once again, why would you make the effort to make something harder on you? Like, I don't know, it's like having a new game on your phone and then going straight to level 300. Like, why? No, you start from the beginning and like, you get comfortable with it before you can get there, and it would happen naturally.
But isn't that very similar to kind of what you were saying earlier of associating like a language with one person, right, or one environment? In like you create that back and forth, like one parent is one language, and so it's almost like, I don't know, I was trying to sort of associate those two things, right? So like that trader example you just gave is because that parent sort of led the child to believe, I can only understand this language. And so
because she never had the opportunity to show. Oh, bye. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
It was a very special context. This woman never went out. She never had a moment to actually have that interaction in English in front of that child. You know what I mean? So the child couldn't, it's like she didn't need to speak in English to anyone else. That didn't happen. That wasn't, the context was like this. So it wasn't that she misled the child. It's just that was a natural thing. She could have a conversation in English, but she didn't need to because the people she was having interaction with were in Spanish, right?
Right.
So then you really have to take context into everything I said. You have to put things into context. And that's what I was saying. It's very hard nowadays. And your situations are difficult because we are in social like context when we have interaction with other people in English, and the children have interaction in English, so they know that we're speaking it. We can't hide to them that, you know, that we do understand and speak another language. And that's why I will come back to that school I worked in London. And you remember what I said? I said, I could not even speak English to the postman. And why is that? For this exact reason. I was showing the children that I do not speak or understand English. Well, okay, I was faking it, but they didn't know that because they didn't know me outside of the school. So when I was at school, they were just trying so hard to speak French to me. And I was only speaking French to them.
I guess the question, the $1 million question is, how do you ensure fluency, or how do you work towards fluency of this
Spoken
other language for the child? Is it a question of, by the time they're at kindergarten, they're just not mature enough to like have that mastery, and we should trust the process and hope that, and it probably happens when they're 10, 12 or whatever, if they continue being exposed to the language? Like, how does that work?
I think having the exposure as much as possible by native speakers is the one fundamental key to this. And as you said, it might be when the child is 10, but it might be when the child is 20 and is going to another country when they don't speak another language, and then he's going to have to use it. Then it's just going to happen like this. So it's not, we always, and it's also a society who wants that. We want immediate reward of things. We want feedback straight away. But sometimes it doesn't happen straight away. And that's the beautiful thing about also Montessori education in general, is like we do seeds, we plant seeds, and we pour a little water and we give them a lot of sun. But sometimes it takes a while before the flower comes out. And as long as you know that you're doing the right thing, the feedback might not happen straight away, but you know that you're giving the right tools to your children to have that for later. Just like love and empathy and open-mindedness and those beautiful values that we have in Montessori, and especially Apache, stronger than any other schools I worked at. And if I'm still here, it's because I really believe in that piece. And it's now, but they're not going to run for president at 5 years old, are they? So we have to believe that what we do now, it's going to be in there forever and in there, and it's going to show later. The same with languages.
I was trying to unmute. I'm on Jeremy's computer. It's a little tricky. I missed a lot of the beginning because I had another meeting, but I've only always spoken Portuguese to Jojo. But it's so interesting, and she doesn't quite understand. It's only recently that she refers to things as a language. Until recently, she used to talk about the different voices. So she used to say, there's mommy's voice and daddy's voice. And for her, it's increasingly difficult to speak Portuguese because we no longer have the Brazilian babysitter, and my parents are not here now because of COVID. And so now she only answers me in English. And it's heartening to hear you say that the seeds are there, because hopefully someday but sometimes she'll start trying to say something in Portuguese, and then she'll say, no, Mama, I have to use my normal voice now. So her normal voice is English, even though I have, from even before she was born, only ever spoken to her in Portuguese. And it's so hard for me because I have this maternal thing of, if any voice is normal, it should be your mother's voice. What do you mean your normal voice? But it is like language is so, it's like this very visceral, gutter, like innate thing where I want for her to think that Portuguese is her, her mother tongue, literally. But no, she says my voice, my normal voice, Mama, is Daddy's voice.
I think it's the choice of words are hurtful, but what she really means is that the comfortable, the easiest, the most recurrent, the most my social language.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm being a social individual right now, trying to find my place in this world. And that's going to be the voice of English because the bubbles are many in English. But it's interesting that she chose the word voice, is because what we talked about at the beginning, when we're talking about language, is one person, one language. So we come back to the noises that we make with our mouth. The noises is voices.
Yeah.
We refer it as languages, but in the end, a voice is a noise.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that she chose those words. But yeah, no, you're doing do not give up. Just carry on. Just carry on. You're doing exactly what you're doing the best thing for both the girls, because it's hurtful and we think, well, she picks English, so I'm just gonna give up on Portuguese. Do not, because it really is that seed in there, and that is going to be her mother tongue, and she's gonna say my mother tongue is Portuguese. That just won't happen right now because there's a lot of happening, but it is going to be. Portuguese is going to be the mother tongue because she heard it when she was inside of you already.
Yeah.
And so just do not forget that. It's always gonna be there.
Yeah. And it's a funny thing, the lack of awareness on her, she's 4.5, but the lack of awareness of, the other day she called my parents to tell them that Miss Katani is having a baby. And
Really?
oh,
sorry.
am I breaking the news?
I didn't know.
Public. We got this email. I assumed it was public. So now on camera. Oh my God.
Oh, I'm very excited. Sorry.
I assume it is public at the school. For those who are here. Oh my gosh. Okay. Miss Katani, I've just broken your news to the world.
Congratulations.
She did not say it was confidential, so I have to trust it is not. Anyway, so Jojo looked at me and said, Mama, how do you say Miss Katani in Portuguese? And I thought, like her like there's no sense of like what is a name and like a proper name, and then her first, she got just tongue-tied and said, but how do you say Miss Katani in Portuguese?
Isn't it very interesting how, I don't know if you were there, but like how interesting it is when I oh no.
Yeah.
Can you hear us, Renee?
Hello. Yes. You were all frozen. I was like, is it really that interesting? So no, I was saying earlier, I don't know if you were there, but I was saying about how children do not translate. The traduction is not a thing in their brain. That's for us. So that's very interesting because actually is a perfect representation of children not translating. And she was trying to do that, but that's not how the brain works at this age. So Miss Kitani is not a Spanish teacher. Miss Kitani is an English teacher. And especially because she knows there is a Spanish classroom and a Spanish teacher. So that was probably interesting, starting to like, you can see the brain slightly shift into that scientific thinking, critical thinking. I was saying, you remember when I was talking about imagination, creativity, and I said 4 is on the really young side of it, but that's when you start seeing the shift onto this critical thinking, scientific brain that is going to look like more hours, and that's 6 years old. You lose that. You become a scientific brain around 6. And that's when you can have your pretend word, your fantasy world, and all of this, right? So it's interesting that she's asking about how do you say this in Spanish, because you see that there is a shift that is starting to happen. And that's when they having those, it's like, why? That's the shift. It's happening. Yeah, but keep speaking Portuguese. It's always gonna be there. It's gonna be the comfort. It's gonna be mommy's voice. And then actually Jerma was saying that when she speaks to your grandparents, she tries harder to speak Portuguese. It takes a while, but she does, because she has to say that language with your parents. So it's interesting how that works.
And I keep telling her, like, it's your job to teach your baby sister our language, because I want her to feel like she likes jobs. So if I can make it her job to pass on the language. I figure maybe that will incentivize her to speak it, but
Maybe that would make her feel like a responsibility to do that. That could be.
yeah.
And once you can have like nannies and things like this and communities and actually be with people safely, that would be a nice way to just start that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It will happen.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions? Any other? No? Okay, so 8 p.m. works better, right? Okay, wonderful. I'm not sure. I think next month is development of movements, if I believe that's right. So that also should be interesting to see what's happening in their little body. We talked about the secret walker earlier. So it's a very, very interesting topic as well, what's happening in the body and how it's like related to the brain. And the body is not necessarily just walking, it's like all the nervous system, digestive system. It's very interesting as well. Language is like my top, but movement and the body and physical development is also very interesting, especially for toddlers, because for the big ones is you know what it is, but for the younger one is very interesting because it's very linked with the social and emotional and language as well, development of of the body and the movement. And so yeah, it should be an interesting talk as well.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for staying up so late.
Oh, it's 2 a.m. for
really
you.
appreciate
right?
it.
It's 3 in the morning. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It's okay.
Thank you.
It's all okay. It's once
so
once a
much.
month. But thank you so much for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm gonna ask Miss Kutani if it's okay to break the news, because I would like to share that video with the rest of the community.
I'm gonna
So we
email
might
her
have
right
to make
now.
a big announcement before we share that video. But
If anybody has any news to spread, just send me an email and I'll say it on camera for you.
well, that's wonderful. We'll be very happy. So thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much, Mr. Nate.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.